more that you can lean into your own personal discomfort, say what needs to be said in a non-offensive way, the more you make the world a better place.
All right, socials. Great to be with you this Tuesday. I hope you're all well. Welcome to our Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time live. Today we're going to be discussing uneven workload and team resentment, a phenomena that's quite common where someone or more than one person from a team begin to speak up about perceived inequity or perceived unfairness in the distribution of effort and the distribution of work. And this needs to be managed by team leadership, supervision, manager. This is quite common. Thanks to Brenda from B Branding for this topic. Lots occurring on social media today regarding fairness in teams and how it's managed, fairness in small work settings and how it's supervised, and particularly the common, widely held kind of experiences that people have. I've experienced in my health and human services career, in my career on the fire service, as not only a firefighter, but then later as a company officer and managing claims of this nature, and then witnessing how they turn out. Why do you think it is that when people observe effort distributed across a group of people in a team, why do you think observing it or noting it in a way that this becomes an issue occurs? What is it about the matter of fairness or equity that's so powerful, so captivating, that when it's experienced, it becomes noteworthy in our experience and in our history? And in other words, when you're observing an unequal distribution of effort in a team, why do you think it shows up intrinsically, naturally? Why is it even noted? So one person is doing more in a team setting than someone else. There's clearly an inequity in work effort and workload. Why is it even noted? People overlook what appears to be conditioning, not just in the West, but by being human through interpersonal interactions, social interactions, that there are intrinsic qualities of fairness that are carried by human beings, things that are already there. It does not take a lot of command of language or a lot of development to notice and observe matters of fairness. And in the work setting, I would say, particularly today, with an extraordinary amount of messaging and awareness out there about perceived equity or perceived inequities, we are living in a time where there is acute sensitivity to matters of fairness. I had a matter of fairness come up even recently in a business transaction that involves multiple stakeholders. Someone had questioned, you know, you're a provider, I'm a provider, they're a provider. Why is there a disparity in cost pricing when we work together? Um, and those questions are valid. They need to be answered, and we need to be clear in all cases when we're addressing it. Um, we need to be clear about whatever it is that might be motivating um, an inequity to the extent that there's perceived unfairness. Um, a big takeaway is that fairness and equity they leverage intrinsic parts of our of our character as a human being. We observe this. There's lots has been written about this. I won't belabor it, but there are qualities that are built in us that are going to show up. This one, fairness, is absolutely one of them. It almost doesn't matter what culture you're in globally. These things can be perceived at a very, very, very young age. And let's talk about what happens in the development of resentment. Resentment, we will define in the purposes of this discussion as a acute awareness about something over which we might feel powerless to change or minimally unappreciative of the observation. In 12-step recovery, we have some very prescriptive work around resentment, that when we experience resentment, that the responsibility rests exclusively with us, not in the external world or the external circumstances, and that we must undertake a attitude adjustment to be rid of the resentment, because the resentment can set the stage for, let's say, further misbehavior or further difficulty. So when this starts to show up in a group setting or a team setting, and people begin to resent the person who, in a perceived way, is, let's say, not sharing their equitable or fair portion of the workload, the resentment needs to be dealt with, and then an explanation on why the inequity. So I can tell you that when I supervised some small teams, there is a distinction between voluntary effort and paid effort. That is not a small distinction. This is something that needs to be brought into awareness. In a volunteer work culture, people who volunteer their time, who are not, let's say, compensated for their duties, a fair explanation for an inequity or uneven distribution of workload might simply be based on the volunteerism of the job, whatever it might be. So, for example, in a volunteer fire company, if you want to put a damper on volunteerism in a volunteer fire department, start highlighting only the people to whom they volunteer for responding to calls more frequently than the ones that don't respond as much. When you start highlighting frequency of call response on a volunteer agency and holding up as example people who sacrifice more, that makes the people who want to sacrifice whatever they can or less than that conclude that their contributions are less valuable, and consequently we lose them. This happens in the fire service across the nation. Now, part of the solution to leveling the playing field of that problem is to put some controls around what the volunteerism is. If you'd like to volunteer here, we have a staffing schedule that people need to adhere to. Before you agree to this, please know the terms now, so that you can somewhat level the playing field in volunteer settings when the rules are shared. But in the absence of that, when people are celebrated for giving more than others, we wind up devaluing the contributions of those who may be giving everything they can, but it's less than someone else. But there's a big distinction between that and uneven workload in a paid environment. This has also occurred, certainly for me as a team supervisor, when we must bring into question the cause of the resentment based on the perceived inequity. Now, let's say the inequity has to do with a very common one in the workplace. Someone frequently uses leave and consequently saddles the rest of the teammates with additional work. At some point, if this is not dealt with, if there's a recurring pattern in the employee's conduct or behavior that's resulting in overuse of leave, that's generating team resentment because this person is not holding up their end. This is something that needs to be addressed ultimately by supervision. And when it is addressed, in I would say one of the common occurrences when we deliver crisis de-escalation training is that people love applying the method to supervisory discussions. So let's say we have to have a conversation with someone, a subordinate, someone we supervise, about a situation where their overuse of leave is resulting in perceived inequity and disharmony in the team. A VDSP for that employee might sound something like this. Um, hey, Albert, uh, I see that this past month you were late to work 7 or 8 times, and in many cases it was at least an hour. Or a better example, when I worked on McNeil Island, if you were late, you couldn't be late 5 minutes because you had to take a ferry to get to the island. So we would call it one boat late or two boats late. If you were two boats late, that was half your shift. If you were one boat late, it was 2 hours. So this is fun, a funner one. Hey, Albert, we've noticed that you were one boat or two boats late 7 times this month. Um, Here at the XYZ Commitment Center, the conditions of employment are punctuality and attendance. If you continue to uh, be late, this is going to result in a disciplinary process. Uh, Instead, if you can correct the problem or tell me what the barriers are to you getting to work on time, I might be able to help with a necessary schedule change or support. Ah, yes, Felice. Or support to make you punctual and more, in line with employment conditions. That's kind of an elaborate VDSP, but here's the point. We're validating and observing that the conduct is occurring and that it's creating some disharmony. We make reference to the rule or conditions or policy or shared value associated with employment. We suggest a course of action, and if it's a negative prompt that I have to give where ongoing lateness is going to result in some kind of performance feedback, I'm going to float that first. If you continue to engage in activity that makes you late or violates your conditions of employment, we're going to have to begin the just cause process. Instead, if you start coming to work on time or minimally explain what the barriers have been so we can problem solve them, then you'll be on a fast track to reducing the difficulty that's occurring in the workplace and here with your team, and then we'll be able to move you forward in your employment here. So that's much different than you got to clean your act up, you're being late, or just having the conversation, focusing exclusively on the misconduct that's resulting in uneven workload or team resentment, and then um, let's say not living the message of supporting rather than simply coercing. Um, and when this goes undealt with, this can be caustic in a team setting. When someone is routinely um, not um, brought to account on the rules around which we organize groups of people. This is fundamentally important. We have to have at least a basic commitment to what the shared rules are. And you may be seeing, it's certainly been my observation, and this is just anecdotal, but there seem to be more and more individualized expressions about why people don't need to be aligned with the group rules. Special accommodations that are not anchored solidly in, let's say, the ADA or other traditional reasons why there may need to be deliberately an inequity to make an accommodation for someone due to a disability. Um, and what's funny is that if you look into the history of the ADA and you look at the author of all the core ideas, which is Jacobus Tenbroek, who founded um, uh, the Federation of the Blind, a person who was blind himself, an attorney, you would see that the level of accommodation that blind people only wanted was to give them an equal seat at the table where they did not use it to abdicate any effort. Whatever was being done for that required sight, if an adaptation could be made for someone without sight, all they ever asked for was that adaptation be provided, um, so that they can have an equal opportunity as someone else at the table. Um, I would encourage anyone to read the formative work of Joseph Tenbroek. Uh, uh, he is the reason we have the ADA today. Um, yeah, thank you. Great comments here. Thank you, Candace. So let's talk about resentment. Someone complaining on the team, feeling resentful, is also an opportunity to bring to their attention opportunities for personal growth. So the best way for me to illustrate this is to describe when I am pissed off at someone in my life or some set of circumstances, and I speak to my own um, counselor or sponsor about it. Um, it's unfair that I was screwed over. It makes me enraged that this person did what they did to me and I'm left holding the bag. And I feel consequently self-pity, fear, self, I, all of the thinking is oriented towards self. The exercise we generally have to do to clear the resentment out has nothing to do with appraising the behavior of the other human being. The exercise has to do with what is it that I'm uh, actually afraid of? What's the thing that is um, is anchored in fear? Uh, what part of my life is the thing that I'm afraid of impacting? Is it my sense of security? Is it my sense of safety, my finances, my interpersonal relationships with other people? Um, and then the moment that I begin to itemize the thing that I'm afraid of and what part of my life uh, is it impacting, what attribute of my life, the resentment seems to go away because it really becomes clear that the adjustment is really in my own mind about something that has to change, particularly with regard to how I'm seeing something. We live in a world where people do bad and wrong things. That's going to occur. I can decide who I want to be in the midst of that. Um, and I can tell you that moving through the extraordinary resentments that I have had about the unfortunate circumstances of life has been an empowering experience to the extent that unpleasant things that happen don't move my needle much anymore. I can decide who I want to be and how I want to be in the midst of unfairness, injustice, things that are inequitable. I'm not saying that there aren't truly things out in the world that don't need to be fixed, but I can decide how I'm going to manage that today. I can accept that things are unfair. I may have to accept on a given day. My supervisor seems incapable of addressing this inequity that's occurring on our team, where Jill seems to endlessly get off or get away with doing less than. I've aired my concern appropriately. I've talked about it with other people. It really is up to me to decide how I'm going to handle this now because it's not getting fixed to my liking. Maybe it's not getting fixed fast enough. Now, if that continues to eat me up, that's on me. That's not on the supervisor who's not fixing Jill, and it's not on Jill. And it doesn't mean that those two things don't need to be fixed. It means that I have to decide how I am going to manage unfairness and injustice and inequity. There's a difference between those things driving affect and then me having to fix everything out in the external world in order to be okay. There's a difference between that and I've accepted that I'm managing unfairness, injustice, and inequity, and I can decide how I have to deal with this today. This may include developing a plan on finding a place to work where I don't have to be exposed to this. I'm choosing to be here. It's not getting fixed to my liking. The supervisor isn't handling it right. I can decide how I'm going to deal with this. A lot of people don't like hearing that messaging today, but I hate to tell you, that answer is a lot older than I am. And, anchored solidly, if you will, in the Stoic principles that seem to be so attractive today to a number of authors, resulting in a lot of books, because there's a lot of suffering out there. And you can decide who you want to be in the midst of that. And I'm not saying that it doesn't mean that you can't rally against forces that are unjust and inequitable. But if you're doing it out of impulsivity and reactivity because of the discomfort, that's not the circumstance's fault. You can decide who you want to be in the middle of that. So when it comes to uneven workload and resentment, resentment's a force that needs to be dealt with by any supervisor or manager, but the work of getting better at managing resentment rests with the individual person. And how we language that in the context of our discussions, supervisor to subordinate, parent to kid, friend to friend, coworker to coworker, has all the difference in what the outcome is going to be in managing the inequity or the injustice together with other people. So I hope you were able to get a little bit of value out of that. I realize it went on some twists and turns, but I really enjoy doing these lives and just sharing a perspective. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you to do that. On Thursday, the next live will be within the Jumpstart Mastery Network, where we focus on topics exclusive to the Jumpstart Mastery community, which is largely a professional community. If you're not a follower at jumpstartmastery.com, please come by and create a free access account and join the environment where we do those lives on Thursdays. We'll see you next week on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Thanks again for joining us. Take good care.